Good afternoon, everyone. Questions? Yes.
Is wget a native command on OS X?
No.
It's only on Linux, right?
Yes. So if you have OS X and you want to get any of these things, you have the exciting choice which of the various package managers to install. And there's Fink, MacPorts, and Homebrew. And I think today's thinking is that Homebrew is the easiest one to get started with. So you install one of them. Let's get started with Homebrew, and then follow the instructions. When you want to have something like wget, you say brew install wget, or with MacPorts you would say port install wget, and then it fetches it from wherever in the cloud and compiles it on the fly. For all of those to work, you need to do something with Xcode. You need to install Xcode, which is a big, huge download, and then you need to start Xcode, and in it also say that you want the command line tools. But it's well worth it. You're going to need it next semester. So anyone who has a Mac, this is a really good time to do this, so that next semester you'll be up and going with that. If you want more instructions, just put a question on Piazza and I'll post some more. Yeah.
It's a lot easier on Windows, though, right? Because I just downloaded it, installed it, and I went to the directory where it was and installed it.
Yeah, generally, is it a lot easier on Windows? This is. It may well be that that there is a version for Windows that works in the Windows shell. What's not so easy on Windows is what you're going to be having to do the next semester, and that is to write other scripts. And so where we're going to be going with that is anyone who's running Windows will be forced into using a virtual machine that runs Ubuntu. So with that, of course, then it'll be trivial. And so if you've already installed that virtual machine for the lab, that's good. If not, it's probably not a bad idea to do that over the break as well, because it used to be in the past that we kind of had separate instructions for Windows, but now with Windows 8, I mean, at some point there's a time to give up, and so that's right now. And so next semester the instructions will simply be for any Unix-like system. And so if you're using Windows, you might as well get started using a virtual machine. And that's really, I mean, I've seen a dozen blogs in the last few weeks where people basically said, if you have Windows, just install the virtual machine and don't bother us anymore. So those of you, I don't know if everyone got the message of that. The what the whole point of wget was. So but let me spend a couple of minutes on it because it's interesting and it's not that we have anything important to do today. So what people wanted to do, and this is something that you want to do, is for the exam, you want to carry with you, everything that you might possibly need. And what I said this time for the exam, what you please do is put it on a USB stick. And I'm saying that because there's always, with 140 students or so, there's always one of them whose actual computer breaks down the morning of the exam, which would be bad, right? And so in that case, we have loaners available. And so if you have all of the stuff that you need on a USB stick, you're still okay. I can give you a loaner, and you can recover. So, and also it kind of magically forces the mind as to what you actually want to have. So please do that. Also, when you do bring that USB stick is only a few bucks. Get one that has enough space for you, that you can afford to lose afterward, that you can afford to just hand to me if there's, again, a network trouble at the exam, and I just take it home and you only get it back next semester because I'm not going to be here around here. Don't give me one that has, like, all of your personal information about that. It's actually, I was somewhat nervous about looking at some of those USB sticks that were handed to me that had all sorts of stuff on there that probably I should not look at too closely. So don't put me into that situation where I need to make these kinds of judgment calls. So just get a fresh, blank, new USB stick. They're $5-6, and put the stuff on there that you need. So and someone posted this question and said, how do I get absolutely everything without having to select everything and click save? And so I really like that question because I think that's good thinking. Every time that you do something 4 or 5 times with a mouse, at some point as a computer scientist, you've got to say, well, that's stupid. There has to be a better way. And so, of course, there is. And so if you wanted to get something of an entire website, then you use this wget command. And as a command, you type it into a shell like this. And I just have done it often enough that I know the magic options. So wget-r is recursive, -np means it doesn't go into the parent. No. And so now wget goes and gets all of these pages here, and I'll show you in a minute where they end up. I'll show you where it ends up with Linux, and that's where normally it should end up. It's a pretty standard utility. Actually, I can do it in another terminal already. It now makes a directory called horstman.com, SJSU fall 2012 CS46A, and in here it has all of the directories. So it makes a directory that that mimics the structure on the web. And so you have to be a little bit careful with how you call it. The -r means recursive, and if you're not careful, it'll grab the entire web, or whatever portion of it fits on your hard disk, right? So the -np means not to climb up a parent directory, and so that way it only goes to subdirectories of the one, and that works perfectly for this. So here it is, and after 55 seconds, it has done the entire thing. So try that at home. And people always complain that it takes some time to master the command line. It makes one's head hurt and stuff. But hey, you can't beat 55 seconds. I mean, even if it takes you a couple hours to learn this stuff, that's less than it would have taken you to do right-click save as on 500 files. Right. Not to mention that you've avoided the trip to the insane asylum on the way. So, so the command line is the way to go. wget is the way to go for this. Now, someone out there will say, but there's also some other utility for this. But just use the standard one. Everyone does. Okay, did that answer the wget question?
Are you grabbing the HTML files, or are you grabbing just files off the server?
I'm grabbing, okay, here's what wget does, is I'm pointing it to this file here, and it's going to grab, of course, the index file itself, and because of the -r option, it'll follow all links. And if those links go to other HTML files, it'll grab those. If those go to images, CSSs, or whatever, it grabs those as well. So wget knows about HTML to the degree that it analyzes what it is that it gets and recursively grabs everything else. Yeah, and it's that recursive grabbing that makes it effective. Sometimes you want to just grab a single page, and you can use it for that too, but of course that's not as much of a win as the recursive process.
But it only goes to, it follows the links on that page. It doesn't.
Oh, no, it'll follow the links, and it'll follow the links to the links. That's why I say it'll eventually suck in all of the web unless you somehow restrict it. So there's various ways of restricting it. You can restrict it to say, only take the ones from this domain, or only take the ones that are children of this particular directory. And that's what the -np does. So you have to find some way of restricting the set. But yeah, just for fun, on someone else's machine, give it the good try and have it, yeah. And wget what you get from google.com or something like that. Okay, other questions? Okay, so I promised some tantalizing hints for the exam. So one of the one of the topics that is going to be happening is that you have to implement various methods of a class, various interacting methods. And so we've done that weeks and months ago in various homeworks. And let's have another quick look at some of those. So there were all these bugs in homework. Let's see where they started. I think they started in homework 3. So there are these bugs that move up and down, left and right. And so there'll be something like that again on the exam because you're already somewhat familiar with them. So I realize it's been a while ago, so you kind of want to look at those bugs again. You want to understand how the dx, the dy worked. Look at those solutions. I would actually look at a few of those problems and just try to quickly solve them again. And if you get stuck, by all means, look at the solutions so that you will refresh your mind as to how these worked. Some of them turned, some of them moved. So the turning and moving, some of them went diagonal, some of them went up or down, some of them bounced off against something. There will be something that has to do with any and all of those various movements, and of course it gets remixed in a different way. And so I want to test, can you do the mechanics of these interacting methods, and this will be the context in which that's tested. So if you have any questions about bugs that you've always wanted to ask, I'll give you a few minutes to put those on Piazza. So if you have any questions throughout, just dump them on Piazza, and then I'll go back. But by all means, have a look at those. Those have not gone away. The other thing that is definitely going to come, just because it's an important part of the syllabus, is tracing of methods. And I wanted to have another look at the midterm for that. Let's see, do I have the midterm? Oh, it's still password protected. Does anyone remember the password? If you put a query on Piazza, I'll remove the password. It wasn't my intent to keep that protected because you'll need it for studying. No, it wasn't any of those. Breakpoint? Very good. All right. Oh, as an aside, for the final, I'm going to distribute it as a password-protected zip file, and so that way I can open up the URL a few minutes before that, and so it would be actually a good idea if you could, if it at all fits in your schedule, if you could show up as early as possible and download the zip file, and then I'll give out the password right on the dot so that everyone can get started at the same time. Also with USB sticks, that way there's not going to be an unfairness about some people getting them early and some people getting them later. So I would, in fact, I would love to be able to do it the night before or something so you could download it at your leisure, but that doesn't work because the protection for zip files is so weak that if you ran a cracker overnight, you would be sure to crack the scheme, and so that would be no good. There's plenty of people who would be able to figure out how to do that and still not have a chance to pass this class. It's an easy matter to download one of those cracking programs. So yeah, it's unfortunate that the security for zip files is so weak and that no one's figured out how to make that stronger, or everyone who knows the stuff knows how to make it stronger, but no one has bothered to integrate that into the standard tools for zip files. So, but 15, 20 minutes is fine. You won't be able to crack the password in that short a time. So at least that way we'll eliminate the unfairness of some people getting started earlier than others. But be sure to practice that. To give you some incentive to practice it, I've encrypted the solution for homework 13. So download the solution for homework 13 from the usual place and see how that interacts with the zipping tool of your choice. There should be some place somewhere where it asks to put in the password, and that password, I believe, was secret. And that will not be the password for the final, for obvious reasons. All right, moving on to the midterm. So I just want to make sure that we'll all get to agree on the format for these walkthroughs. So there will be another one of these things where there's going to be some amount of code, and you're asked, run through this code a step at a time, be the computer, and update the local variables. So there'll be some form like this that you need to fill out. Of course, in a completely different context. But it is a skill that will be tested once again. And I just really want to make sure that this time everyone uses the same format. So let me look at the solution here.
So it should just be one thing per line.
That's the one thing per line thing that is important, yes. So that was the midterm. And it was, I believe, this one. So if you look at this one here, it says that the first thing that happened was that I was set to 0. Afterwards, more was set to true. After that, CH was set to a question mark. After that, CH was set to an I. After that, more was set to false. After that, K was set to 0, then K was set to 1, then CH was set to a space, then K was set to a 2, then I was set to a 2, and after that, those three variables, more, CH, and K, went away, which means that the block that they were defined in was terminated. So in the case of these variables going away, I didn't want to go into philosophical discussions which of them go away earlier. So those you can put in any order, or you can put all of the x's in one line. So what are common things that I've seen people do wrong? I've seen people who would put like this false here. They would say to save some space, there is a shortage of space in the universe after all. They would put the false here, and then, it doesn't show which one comes before or after the other. So don't do that. The other thing that I've people seen doing is that every time that a value changed, they put an x under it or over it or besides it or whatever, and that's the wrong meaning of x. The x means in this context that the variable goes away, not that it changes. So make sure that you understand what it means for the variable to change versus that it goes away, and how that temporal order works. If anyone has any questions about that, put it on Piazza before the final, and I'll be glad to give another example or something. But really, if you follow through the example in the midterm, which a good number of you had trouble with, so it's a good example to follow through again, and independently do it on a sheet of paper, and then open up the solution and see that you hit upon the right solution. If you can't do that, you'll be doing fine on the same problem on the final. It is kind of not the greatest problem, but it turns out to be a great predictor between those who easily pass the course and those who are challenged by it. So I will have another one after Monday. Any question about this particular vexing issue? Oh, they're the characters, because it's, this is not something that I've been heavily grading on, but technically speaking, question mark is a character and not a string. In this particular context, it was defined as a character.
Is that a space character then?
Yes, and so this one here is a space character. And here, but if that wasn't the key point of the assignment, if someone wrote space as S-P-A-C-E, that was fine.
I just want to make sure that they
No.
like it did.
No. So some people use double quotes, and that was not technically correct, but I didn't say anything because that was not what I was after. I was after, can people read code and figure out in which sequence stuff gets changed? All right. The other thing from the midterm is that there was one of those graphic problems, if you remember, the one where you had to draw a bunch of things. Where is it here? Where you draw some image. So there will again be another one that has a different image. But it'll be something that contains squares and circles and rectangles and lines in some configuration that will surprise and amaze you. And then you need to recreate it. The only difference is that I want to make doubly sure that people don't cheat on this one. And so I was concerned whether people would fail to use loops, whether they would just write the code to paint 9 rectangles and 10 circles. And so this time I will make doubly sure that that doesn't happen, that I will give you the number. I won't tell you exactly how many of the circles and rectangles and whatever will be drawn. I'll just say there'll be so many of these and so many of those, and that'll be passed into the constructor of the component, and you'll have to draw as many as it says. And then when I test it, I'll test it with a different number than what I gave to you. So in this case here, I might give you that there should be 10 of these things in a row, but then my test might run 20. And if I see those 20 appear, then that means you correctly used n as a variable and gave me n of them. If, on the other hand, I only see 10, then I don't even have to look at your code to see that something went wrong. Yes?
Give us a sample tester.
I will give you a sample tester. Yeah, because, in the heat of the battle, I don't want you to have to focus on writing a tester as well. So I'll give you a sample tester with some value for the numbers of this and the numbers of that, and then I'll test it with a different one. So just make sure that you use the numbers and not hardwire in like 10 and 5 or some such thing. Yes?
But those are going to be parameters, right? Whatever the numbers are.
Yeah, so that, and the way it is I can't give it as parameters to paint component because I'm not calling paint component. So there'll be parameters to the constructor. I will give you the constructor. The constructor will save them away into instance variables, and then you have to use those instance variables. So if you wanted to test that, you could just rewrite this guy here in that fashion and just make as a parameter the number of rows, the number of columns, and then try that out. But it'll be pretty obvious. I just wanted to point it out that wrinkle will exist. And again, the important thing for me is, can you write a loop where these things happen, where inside the loop you compute the position of every one of them? So those of you who had trouble with this particular one, you absolutely, definitely want to, without looking at the solution, recreate this very same example, then go back to the practice exam of the midterm and recreate that one. And I think if you've done those two, you ought to be able to do the one on the final as well. Yes?
Are you going to put out a practice test?
No.
You are?
No. So the only practice that you're getting is the practice that I've been putting up for the last couple of weeks.
All right.
But there won't be like a specific practice test. Yes?
This is just about loops. So do you prefer enhanced for loops or like regular for loops?
It's entirely up to you. There's not a question on the exam that forces you into one choice or the other. Yeah, what I personally do is, if I can use the enhanced for loop, I will always use it. It is simpler, it is safer, and every time that I get the chance to use it, I say thank you, because I don't have to worry about the gory details of where that index variable goes to. And so that generally my first attempt is, can I use it? It's fortunately easy enough to see when you can use it, namely when you don't need the position. So if all you care is the values that you're traversing, then you can always use the enhanced for loop. If, on the other hand, for some reason you need the position, maybe because you need to stick in something before or after, or remove it, or simply because you ask where the position is, then you regretfully have to go to the regular old for loop. That's what I personally do, and that, of course, becomes easier after you've written a few thousand loops. If, on the other hand, you say, oh gosh, that's another thing to worry about, I'm just always going to write the regular for loop, that's fine too. I'm not too concerned about that. Eventually, after having written 1,000 loops, everyone comes around to doing it the way that I've described. So this is not something that I'm concerned about teaching. Other questions? Yes?
Well, that kind of made me wonder, if you said that you want to use an enhanced for loop for things that are like, where you don't want to return the indexing. But what if you can still add a counter into your enhanced for loop?
Okay, so his question was, what if you want to count something? Can you use the enhanced for loop? And absolutely.
That would also give you your index.
Okay, well, it depends. If you count matches, the most common case where I would count something is I want to count how often something happened.
But you could just count it.
If I counted every time, then I would have the index. But, at that point, I would say if I already have to keep an index, then I might as well use the index in the loop header. But you could do it the other way around. You could say, I'll always use the enhanced for loop, and if I want an index, I'll keep an extra index with. Yeah, that would be another way of doing it. Yeah, but in the context of the exam, there's nothing that grades for style. So the first solution that works, is the one that you should gravitate to. I should also point out again that it is a really good idea to make a few blank projects in BlueJ. I can tell you that there will be 7 problems, and so nothing can be, there's nothing wrong with having projects, problem 1, problem 2, up to problem 7, where you just call each of the classes uppercase problem 1 to problem 7, and if you're lucky, you get to use them. Right? That way, you can already put in public static void main and that kind of stuff, and it saves you a few valuable seconds. Yeah, just put all of that stuff on your USB stick. That way, you have it ready to go during the exam. Yes. How many what?
How many points?
I have no idea how many points there are. I mean, some number between 0 and 100, but it's not 100. So generally, the way the points come out is I write the rubric, and I figure out. I try to come up with what is a reasonable unit of achievement, and then some problems are worth 13, and some of them are worth 18, and whatever is the sum is the sum. And so I make no particular effort to have it come up to 100. In fact, if it does by accident come up to 100, I mess it up a little bit so that it doesn't, because I don't want a student to come and say, I got 93 out of 100, shouldn't I get an A? Or conversely, I got 47 out of 100, shouldn't I fail? It is graded on a curve. So if a lot of people get 93, then that 93 is not as valuable as if only a few people get 93. And again, the reason for grading it on the curve is that all of the problems are new and have been unseen before. It's just too difficult in a time where all the past exams are published and available to know what the next exam is going to be like. They're all new problems, and so what counts is how you guys collectively do at it. And every time I say, gosh, this sounds like an unscientific way of doing it, every time I'm surprised as to how neatly this it dovetails with everything else that has been going on in class. So don't worry about the points. You should simply do the best that you can on the exam, and not try to shoot for a particular number of points. There was some long distance runner who was asked how he could consistently and after race come out to be number 1 and defeat all these other people. And he said, I never worried about defeating all these other people. I only worry about defeating number 2. So that's your job, to defeat number 2. Yes? There will be one question that will be using interfaces in a way that I think, even if you slept through the entire thing and somehow managed to solve homework 13 by osmosis, you would still be able to answer it. But the setting will be somewhat similar as in homework 13, so it would be a good idea to look at homework 13 and its solution. It will not be the same interface, but it'll be an interface that is similar in nature to that of that homework.
But is it going to be more similar to 13A and B where you're
Yes.
implementing it, or 13?
It'll be more. I don't actually remember. I'm sorry, I don't remember. So you'll have to look at all of them. But it totally could be one or the other. It was a kind of similar interface that. But the methods in it were definitely somewhat different. But you should be able to understand what was involved. The algorithms will be somewhat easier because there were some technical complexities, particularly with 13B and C, that I wouldn't expect people to be able to do on the exam. I would expect them to do them somehow, but not in that short a time. But it'll say something like, here's an interface, implement this method, and then the fact that it comes from interface you don't really have to care about. Or it might say, here is an interface, do something with it. And again, the fact that it's an interface and not a class is not really important to you. If I had said, here is a class, use it with these methods, what's it to you whether it's a class or an interface? You're given a well-described way of how this thing works, and you just need to put it to use. So when you see interface, don't worry about it. It's not meant to test any esoteric features of interfaces. So there will be no questions that say, what happens if this method is not implemented, or there will be no bug that you need to trace where a method is not implemented or anything like that. I can confidently say there'll be nothing with inheritance, so that's something that you can put away until next semester. Other questions? Yes?
I was looking at the lab for next semester, the first lab for 46B, and BlueJ doesn't have that autocomplete where you can just make instance variables and link methods for them.
So for next semester, you'll be saying sayonara to BlueJ, and you will be using NetBeans for everything. And someone will say, well, what about Eclipse? I hate NetBeans. I like Eclipse. And again, you're free to use everything that you want at home, but in the labs, we need to standardize on something. There's one lab that uses Mercurial, a version control system, where the NetBeans plugin is seriously easier to use than the Eclipse one. And so since you're already familiar with NetBeans from the Alice assignments, we decided to carry through NetBeans. So for this exam, I recommend that you use whatever you're most familiar with, so it really doesn't matter. There may be a debugger question again with a screenshot. I haven't made up my mind on that one way or another, but you can do it in whatever system you want. My recommendation is, of course, just stick with BlueJ until the exam, and then use the break to move over to NetBeans. The other thing is I will be rejiggering the labs for 46B a little bit, since some of them are new and they turn out to be longer or more complex than we thought. So you probably don't want to go through the entire labs over the break. Oh, and the other thing that I think I mentioned before is the textbook for 46B. You don't have to buy a new textbook. So if you already have the current textbook, no matter what the bookstore may say, I've tried to set them straight, and I think they've gotten it, but if for whatever reason the bookstore says that you should be buying a different book for 46B, it is not true. I've talked to the 46B instructor, Dr. Taylor, and he understands. He'll be using the remaining chapters out of the concepts book, and there'll be 3 or so chapters that you'll just be getting in PDF. Those will be the same chapters as in the book that other students will use starting in fall 2013, but you're getting them at no charge in PDFs. And so there's no need to buy a book. If, on the other hand, you've never bought a book before and now you find it's finally time, then you might as well buy the new version. Okay, more questions about any of this before I go? What's that? No, I was going to say a few more things. I just wanted to know whether there's any questions about this right now. All right, so another thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to go through a couple of the practice problems and give a bit of an idea on why I've put them there, so that as you hopefully practice some of those in the next few days that you know. So let's go to Piazza. And there was a question about one of them, so I thought I could start us with that one. So yeah, someone had a question on this particular problem about letter frequencies. So so let's look at this problem here really quick. So we want to know the frequency of each letter, and we're only looking at A to Z and lowercase a to z in a string. And so we're supposed to return an array of length 26. And so to understand this, let's first of all get out a sheet of scratch paper. So if I have a string like this, and now what am I supposed to do? Let's pick the A. The A seems to have occurred a few times. So the A here occurs 1, 2, 3, 4 times. And to report the frequency, then I also need to know what is the total number of characters. And now let's see, it was a little bit ambiguous do I completely discount the spaces, or do I count the spaces for the frequency? So let's see if we can see that from the description. It's totally ambiguous, right? So reading, well, it says as a percentage between 0 and 1, but a percentage of what?
Well, I was talking about it doesn't include spaces. It says counts the frequencies of letters A through Z.
Okay, the optimist in the first row here says, well, it says A to Z to A to Z, but I've been around the block a few times, and I can tell you that someone else could have said, well, I want you to count the frequencies of only those letters, but still using all letters. So it is a little unclear. Fortunately, we have a tester. I just want us to realize that maybe the frequency in this case means 4 over the length of the string. Maybe it means 4 over the number of letters. And we don't really have a great way of knowing that after having parsed that problem a couple of times without looking at how the test cases fall out. So what's the easier of the two? The length, right? Because we can just ask the string how long it is. So let's try that first. So apparently we need to count. Now the problem gives us a nifty hint. It says we should have an array of counters. Well, it doesn't say that we have to have an array of counters. It says we should return an array of counters. But it seems that if we had such an array, and each time we met an A, we tallied that one up, so we managed to get 4 of them. We don't have any B's or C's, but we'll have a few E's here. If each time we incremented the right counter, that would seem to be a good strategy. So now if I have a letter C, how do I know which counter to increment? Well, actually, the problem very nicely said, no, it doesn't quite say it quite so nicely. It kind of gives us a hint here that a letter has the form like quote A, quote plus I. But that means I could take the letter and subtract A, and that would give me a number that's between 0 and 25, right, if the character is Z. And of course, if it's an uppercase letter, then I would have to subtract the uppercase A to get that index between 0 and 25. So that gives me a bit of an idea that I will likely need to use characters rather than substrings. We've not iterated through strings for a few weeks, but there's always a choice that you have to make when you iterate through strings. Do you take substrings of length 1 to look at the characters, or do you take individual characters? So do you use substring or do you use char at? And that's a decision you just have to make depending on the problem. Substring tends to be more convenient if you later have to assemble them again. Char at is more convenient if you need some of the methods such as is digit, is letter, which don't exist for strings. In this case, it looks like char at is the way to go because we're subtracting another character, and you can't subtract two strings from another. So over here in the code, all right, so now I have to make a decision. Do I know this problem well enough that I just start typing, or should I start a project? I'll just, you know what? It's probably easier for you to see if I do it in BlueJ, so let me do that. And we are at lecture 26. The name of this class was letters. Okay, so I have it nice and big. I can always paste it back in, but now I have like convenience such as automatic cleanup and stuff. completion. So it seems a better way of doing this in BlueJ. So I'll make myself an array of integers for the counters. I'll iterate through the characters in the string. Notice that I'm typing this part of the loop from memory. And that is probably a good thing to put up on a cheat sheet or somewhere, like these very standard loops, how to get at each character in a string. And I'd also write out the other one where you use substring, where instead it says string sub equals stir.substring from I to I plus 1. If there's any string problem on the exam, it'll definitely do this kind of iteration. All right, now I'm supposed to find out if it's a letter. So there's a function that tells me whether something is a letter. If you look at chapter 4, it says there's a bunch of standard classifiers. This letter is digit. Yes?
So that character parameter, character dot, is that just what you call the class? So you get that at the point?
I'm sorry?
Why do you have character dot in front of it? What is that?
Oh, that's the isLetter. It's a static method that's defined in the character class.
So you can't just put isLetter.
No. It's exactly like math.square root. Yes. That's just totally like math.square root. So I'll do it right now, but there's something that I want to talk about in a minute. It's to lowercase, to uppercase. Well, we'll find out soon enough when it complains. So I'll force it to lowercase. I'll say my index is ch minus lowercase a. And now I can say counters bracket I. Plus plus. Let's see if it compiles. I just want to make sure about the to lowercase here. Okay, looks like I need to look up on the API documentation what it actually is. So make sure that you've downloaded the API documentation. Notice that I have it on a local file. I'm not reading it from the internet because you don't want to be frustrated if the internet doesn't work out. So here's character. Okay, and it's true, as you can see, the case is with an uppercase C. All right, variable I is already defined. Fine. Index. Okay, I still need to return something. Right now I have the counters. So I still need to divide them by the total length. Where I'm going to do that, I guess that's another loop. Divided by string.length. Okay. Missing a return statement. Return. I think I just made my point on why it's better to do this thing in BlueJ than it is to do it inside NetBrad. because when you do it inside BlueJ, these kinds of things are faster. You get the report back faster than having to submit it to the web and having to wait for the error. So, incompatible types. All right. So I can't touch this because that would be counterproductive with NetBrat, so I have to change it here. And let's see, is that fatal? Now I'm counting them as 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. That should be okay. Aha. Did I just... See, even with something simple like this, there's an infinite number of small errors that one can make. Okay, now it compiles, so we could paste it in and see what happens. Okay. Okay, so we failed the last one. So it looks like I'm not supposed to count the spaces after all, right? That was the ambiguity here. Now what do I do? Yeah, what's the easiest way of putting that in here? So over here, I want to know what is the total number of letters. No. You can do it as you go along. So when you're in this loop here, you found a letter. So you can increment it here. That way you don't have to make another pass through it. And that's kind of a useful thing to think about it because if you have to make another pass through it, it's not that I care about the efficiency, but you care about the number of keystrokes in the exam. So if you happen to have this insight, that's good. On the other hand, if you just have to copy and paste the loop, it's fine too. Yeah.
Don't you somehow use that counters index variable? Because it's counting exactly the same.
No, it's counting something different. And to see that, let's look at my my example here. So I'm now going to, I have this table here, and I also have, I'll just call it total for now. And so now I'm seeing it uppercase M. That means that down here I'm going to increment the counter for M and the total. I'll see the A, that's the one that got me this one here, and the total. The R, gets me the R, and the total. The Y gets me the Y and the total. The space here now doesn't increment anything. But at these ones here were 0, 1, 2, 3, and they had nothing to do with the index values, which were 0, 13, 16, and 24, or some such thing. So they were completely different values. Okay, so this won't compile because there's semicolon expected. Oh, there's some parentheses here. And it also won't compile because I didn't declare the variable. Total number. Or if an exam, you just call this thing total or T, no one's going to hold it against you. And now we have sweet success. Now my only misgiving is I have not answered the question on Piazza where someone said, why didn't it work for me? So someone here had a 0.300004. Let's see, did he post the code? Ah. Okay, what happened here? Yeah, why 1/10 anyway, right? Because that would only work if the string actually happened to contain 10 characters. So that was probably bogus. But even if one did, what I had at one point considered, I said maybe instead of doing a plus plus here, I say plus equal 1 over the total number of letters. But that's probably a more fragile approach because you're building in these round-off errors. So the idea is to first do it as integers and then do the division. So this is, I thought, was a good problem because it combines various things that we've talked about in class. Computing totals, iterating through the characters in a string, and it puts them together in a new light. So that was why I put it as one of the ones to have a look at. So in general, the problems that I put up is once in a while there's one that was just really easy so that people who just got into it didn't get demotivated, and once in a while there was one that was pretty challenging just to give something interesting to everyone. But most of them are these kind of bread and butter problems. And I haven't gotten a lot of good feedback whether people are doing these and whether it's productive or not to add in more. So I'll put in a quick poll on Piazza to get me to that. So if you could open your laptops and answer that. And I'm going to have to just type in the actual options here, so give me a minute. All right. That will be our last Piazza poll. Okay, is it showing up? All right. So one more of these. How do I do this?
Look at all these people making
Okay. It's not what I meant. Oh, here, practice. All right, so here I have an example of a practice problem while you're laboring on that poll that I kind of would classify as an easy problem. You can see it's logic number 1. So if you just got into it, if you haven't had time or interest to doing them so far, focus on some of the easy ones first to get motivated. So, and they're all totally artificial. All their practices, and you write loops and branches and stuff. So two integers a and b return their sum, but these numbers are extra lucky. So if either one of them is between these, just return 19. So that one probably is so easy you can just label it here. So, and in this environment you can't add helper methods, unfortunately. So you just have to duplicate the code. So if 13 is less than equal A and A is less equal 19, or 13 is less equal B and B is less equal 19, return what, 19? Else, what am I supposed to return? Return this sum. There we go. Go. And it worked. Okay. So, well, that's easy for me to say. But so I don't actually expect those of you, particularly those of you who need some extra practice with these ands and ors, to come it up that quickly. But I think you've got to agree that this is something that if you spend 15 minutes at it, it ought to be attainable. Or if not, you still have a good chance to put in a question on it and get help on it so that you can catch up before the exam. So by all means, do as many of these as you can. There's no obligation to do any or all of them, of course, but I've picked them because I felt they were good practice. I kind of wanted to have a sense on whether I should come up with more of them or whether we have already enough. So let's see what our little poll here came out. So most of them intend to do them after class ends. So I think I'll kind of call it a day now, because there's going to be more than enough for those of you who intend to catch up. There's at least 20 or so, and so I'd rather have you shooting for doing them all after class ends. And those of you who do them every day, I don't need to help you anyway, because you're going to be passing the exam no matter what. So I'm not too worried about that. So you've seen the last of the practice problems, and really try to get through them all. They really are good practice, and they're better practice than just about anything else you could be doing. I've given you a few hints of the problems that I think you should have a look at from previous homeworks, from the midterm. So those hints, are good hints. They will help you do those practice problems. And otherwise, I think that's really all you can reasonably do for the exam. Don't waste your time reading the otherwise fine textbook. It has nothing there to help you. You can bring the textbook, of course, to the exam, the physical or the e-book, whichever, and that might help you out a little bit. Be sure to bring 2 things to the exam. 3 things to the exam. What are the 3 things you need to bring? A flash drive, a laptop, and an extension cord. I couldn't care less about. No, I do care about yourself. So no, bring yourself. Yes, and do bring an ID card. I was told I'm supposed to check IDs, and in 2 hours and a bit I'll have the chance to check everyone's ID. We will again have a regime where you need to sit up here in the visible area on an actual chair. I was told that having people sit on the floor isn't so good, so if worst came to worst, you'll just have to sit right next to each other. Come a few minutes early. That'll definitely be helpful in getting everything arranged. And it would really be super, super helpful if you turned on the wireless before that. All right, well, I hope you have learned something. If not, you have only yourself to blame. And good luck next semester.